Hello, I'm Sophie Kreitzberg, Program Manager of the Barnard Center for Research on Women. And I'm happy to be welcoming you to tonight's discussion on Love in a Fucked Up World, How to Build Relationships, Hook Up, and Raise Hell Together by Dean Spade, who is joined in conversation by Thao Nguyen. I want to offer a few quick notes on accessibility and gratitude, starting with a land acknowledgement. Tonight's event is taking place online, but we're all physically located someplace, and we recognize that all land is Indigenous land. Barnard College is located on the traditional and unceded territory of the Lenape people. In terms of accessibility, you can find a link to access live transcription for this event directly under the video on the BCRW event page or in the YouTube video description. Thank you to Shanti Lira from Total Caption for providing the live transcription. Our ASL interpreters for tonight's event are Glashonda Lawyer and Valerie Avila Tamavong from Coco Language Advocacy and Consulting. Thank you both so much for your work to provide this essential service. We are so happy to be working with both of you again. We are planning for tonight's event to take place for 1.5 hours, ending around 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. If you have a question for Dean or Thao, you can type it into the YouTube chat. We'll be collecting any questions there for the Q&A that will take place towards the end of the discussion. I also want to thank my coworkers at BCRW for making this event possible, including Hope Dector, Pam Phillips, Olivia Cummings, Margot Kotler, Sandra Moyano Ariza, and Rebecca Jordan-Young. Before we get started, we'll now hear a few words on academic freedom from BCRW's director, Rebecca Jordan-Young.
Warm greetings, everyone, and welcome. I'm Rebecca Jordan-Young, Interim Director of the Barnard Center for Research on Women, or BCRW. BCRW is dedicated to creating space for feminist and queer knowledge production. And as most of you are probably aware, this sort of knowledge is under intense attack right now in the US and globally. As an academic research center, BCRW follows principles of academic freedom with our research and our events. More than just freedom of speech, academic freedom broadly is the principle that academic spaces should be places where we can push the boundaries of knowledge without fear of reprisal or censorship. And it also means that we don't vet what speakers are going to say ahead of time or require that people only present ideas that we agree with. Otherwise, we could never push the boundaries of knowledge. That brings me back to Dean, whose deeply original thinking and work has opened up new ways to think about the world. Dean's writing and organizing are inspiring precisely because of this, and we're so glad to have him with us again. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you so much, Beck. It is an honor to introduce Dean Spade, who has been an amazing longtime collaborator of BCRW, creating videos and programming on mutual aid, prison abolition, queer liberation, disability justice, and transformative justice. Dean is the author of Normal Life, Administrative Violence, Critical Trans Politics and the Limits of the Law, and Mutual Aid, Building Solidarity During This Crisis and the Next. He has worked for 25 years in movements for trans liberation, prison abolition, and anti-militarism. Please join me in welcoming Dean, who will introduce Thao, followed by a short reading from the book.
Thank you, Sophie. Thanks to everyone at BCRW for making this event happen, and thanks to the interpreters. And I just want to say a few words following up on Beck's comment about academic freedom. I know many people might be watching this because you're excited about Thao's amazing work or because you're excited about my book, and you might not be connected to Barnard or know that Barnard is the women's college that's part of Columbia University, and that Barnard and Columbia are both real front runners right now in repressing student organizing in solidarity with Palestine. And this week, Barnard expelled 2 student organizers, and there's a lot of really beautiful mobilization happening, including I just heard that students today have occupied Millbank Hall at Barnard College. So I just wanted to put us in context of who we're with, and that BCRW has been a radical outpost at Barnard for decades. I was a student worker at BCRW. I've collaborated with them for over a decade on so many different radical projects. They're so unlike the kind of broader context of how universities are. And I'm really grateful for how brave and risky the work is right now. So let me introduce Thao. Thao Nguyen is best known as a musician with many beautiful collaborations, and as part of a band called Thao and the Get Down, Stay Down that a lot of people listen to. Thao and I met because Thao was collaborating with the California Coalition for Women Prisoners, an abolitionist org in California that's been supporting people inside and getting out of prisons for decades. And Tao's 2013 album, We the Common, was very much in collaboration with people at CCWP. And when BCRW and I worked on a video in 2013 or 14 called Impossibility Now, we used Tao's song, We the Common. So we've all been collaborating together for a while. Thao is currently working on a book for Grey Wolf, which is a collection of creative nonfiction essays about growing up in diaspora. The working title of the book is Anchor Me in the Open Sea. I'm really excited about this, and I hope that we'll all be reading it together soon. So, as Sophie said, I'm going to start by just reading the conclusion of Love in a Fucked Up World, just as a way for people who haven't read the book yet to kind of bring some of the themes into the room. And the conclusion's kind of got some heaviness to it that I think reflects what a lot of people are feeling in the current moment, with the constant onslaught of terrifying news and kind of like a little about that why these ideas in this book are meaningful to me right now. So many of us turn towards self-help books with the hopes of instantaneous change. Capitalism sells promises of total health, wealth, and blissful happiness. But in reality, being alive is a wild, constantly changing mix of beauty and suffering, agony, contentment, and dissatisfaction. No matter how we fight it, everything around us is impermanent. Everything we want and love will come to an end, just as our lives will. We have to approach both our relationships with each other and our own healing with a humble outlook and reasonable expectations. One question often guides me when I am stuck. What am I so afraid of being seen doing that I'm willing to limit my steps toward what I want in my life? If you use the methods outlined in this book, you might experience more emotional awareness. You might begin to notice the moments when you're gripped by autopilot reactions. You might hear cultural scripts like the romance myth or scarcity thinking running through your mind and find ways to resist their pull. You might be able to think, that's not me, that's not mine. You might notice when you're reacting in ways that are out of proportion to the situation. Perhaps you might connect this reaction to a fear of abandonment or engulfment and recover before you say something or do something hurtful to someone you love. Or you might say those hurtful things, but be better able to apologize. You might gossip less. You might find your conflicts bring you closer to others rather than damaging your relationships. You might become better able to say yes, no, and maybe to other people. You might find autopilot reactions still arise in you, but they don't determine your behavior and you recover more quickly. You might not feel as much shame about them. You might find that people or situations that used to really get under your skin just don't get you worked up anymore. It's helped me to return to this idea that healing is a spiral staircase. I think about myself walking a circle like a clock. As I heal, I'll re-encounter again and again the same wounds that have shaped my life and the coping mechanisms I developed to get through rough times. Each time I re-encounter them, rather than being ashamed to still be affected or disappointed that I'm not fixed yet, I try to cultivate acceptance. This is the hand I was dealt. And everything in my life, all that is beautiful and all that is rough, all that is shared and all that is lonely, stems from this same hand. My task is to cultivate discernment and clarity about these conditions so that I can act with compassion and intention, rather than being blown around by cultural forces that try to shape me and a past that I can't change. I can be grateful for the coping mechanisms I came up with as a kid, and also decide to update how I react to the world around me, to develop habits and foster choices that get me more of what I want and better align with my values and beliefs. I also have to remember that I'm not something to be improved. There is no fixing, even as I seek to cultivate new skills and capacities. Life is not going to get easier in the years to come. The crises we are facing are real and worsening. Most of us are in some denial about this because it's overwhelming, hard to comprehend. Reports of global heating, mass extinction, sea level rise, extreme weather, failing crops, ocean acidification, zoonotic diseases, deforestation, and melting ice sheets have become more dire than scientists had predicted even just a few years ago. The industrial consumer society that created this crisis has already caused such irreversible change to the planet that our lives will be irrevocably altered. Many people are already acutely affected. Even if all the governments in the world stopped pandering to the interests of the ultra wealthy, and even if all the industries immediately stopped polluting, neither of which is happening, the damage already inflicted has irreversibly changed the planet. We can and should try to reduce any harm that we can. But we also have to face the reality that our lives are about to get much harder. Contemporary human society is dependent on extractive systems for survival. The way we eat, travel, get healthcare, and communicate all pollute and extract. And the COVID pandemic revealed the fragility of the supply chains that keep this situation afloat. It's all so bad, and it's about to get so much worse. And even if this previously preventable collapse unfolds, even as this previously preventable collapse unfolds, we've been misled about how dire things are. We've been led to believe that governments and experts will fix this. The catastrophic impacts are multiplying, yet we are fed feel-good stories about renewables, an urge to funnel our profound fear and desire for collective action into individual consumer choices, social media posts, voting, and donating to nonprofits whose efforts at policy reform only tinker with the overarching systems causing the crisis. This is the reality of our situation. And in the times to come, we're going to need each other more than ever. As I let this incomprehensible and heartbreaking truth into my life, I'm filled with anger and grief. But hand in hand with that grief is an even deeper appreciation for the beauty of the living planet and the bold resistance and care that people demonstrate every day in the face of these conditions. I'm inspired to further divest from the systems of greed that have created this mess and to shake off all the bad ideas and habits they have implanted in my psyche. I ask myself, How do I want to be in these times? Again and again, the answer I come to is that I want to face up to these tragedies with an open and loving heart. I want to be part of collective efforts to care for others and stop as much destruction as possible. I want to appreciate every remaining moment of my life, even knowing that much is out of my control. I want to live according to my principles and priorities, not wasting time on nonsense I've been told is important. I want to be deeply connected to the people I love. I want to find more ways to care for strangers and create survival strategies that are collective and inclusive, not disruptive and insular. In the times to come, we're going to have to find ways to be with one another under enormous stress and devastating grief. We'll be called on to demonstrate capacities that are devalued and underdeveloped in dominant society: generosity, courage, connection, compassion, and imagination. I want to be as awake to what is happening as possible, as capable as I want us all to be, as capable as we can be to respond in ways that align with collective liberation. I want us to be able to relate to others with as much integrity and compassion as we can, responding to immediate conditions rather than being stuck in old cultural scripts or coping mechanisms that undermine effective action. The romance myth is a lie. There is no happily ever after coming. There never was. Instead, there is the possibility of being here for what's here, of treating others and ourselves as well as we can, of experiencing the thrills available in intimacy, collaboration, collective resistance, and belonging. Let's be here for what's here, together, in this gorgeous, fucked up world.
That was beautiful, Dean.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this work. I was able to just finish reading it this morning, and I found it so illuminative and inspiring and provocative and fortifying. And to start, I wondered if you could talk to us about, a book is such a gargantuan undertaking, and I wondered if you had seminal points along the journey. Are there moments that you can recall where you felt that this kind of book was the thing, was what you were being called to create?
That makes me so curious about how different forms of self-doubt are in your work, because when I hear this question, the main thing I think about is how terrified I have been for 10 years while writing this book at different times. Like, who am I to write this book? I don't have any of this stuff figured out. And these books are usually written by therapists. And is self-help just like neoliberal, and are all the other serious radicals gonna laugh at me and everything? And yet I would continue to work on it because I was just, I'm writing this book to myself. It's just all the stuff that I'm working out over all this time, trying to show up in our movements and in all of my relationships that make up my life, and seeing how impacted I am by these cultural scripts, and how these patterns of reactivity are like breaking up groups I'm in and projects that are really important that need to happen, and how what's out there in the self-help literature feels like not really relevant to a lot of people I care about. Like, I'm reading that stuff, but I'm also like, this is really individualist and really sexist and racist and, classist and ableist, like all the things. Like it's just like those literatures are really not by us and for us in terms of people in liberation movements. And so I just felt like I really wanted to translate some of that out and put some of the things that were actually useful into frameworks that were politicized and that connect to how we see the world and how we see the connections between our liberation of our psyches and relationships and what's considered personal to our ability to be part of really massive collective action to stop, ecocide and genocide. And so I felt, I mean, it's a really good lesson. Like I procrastinated the work on this book at many points a lot. I had to create a ritual where I had written myself like a letter about why it was okay for me to write this book. And I would like light a candle and read that to like be like to help myself get to the purposefulness and not be like lost in the self-doubt that can show up as just like a wandering mind or like, oops, now I'm checking my email again. Like, yeah, I'm actually just curious if you have like, how has like authorization shown up in you making your work, because your work has these radical themes and these exposes experiences that are intimate and politicized. Yeah, I'm curious what this is like for you.
Well, I wish I had employed the writing myself the letter and the ritual. Yeah, I've gone a more arduous route where it was like the way the self-doubt became so miserable that I had to resolve that I just needed to experience a different thing, So it was less proactive. It was more like I don't know if this is well. It was more like, this is so untenable, I have to do something differently, and over the course, as over the course of a 20 plus year career, there are ebbs and flows. There are peaks, valleys, and there, as in my desire and the importance of wanting to be a part of, wanting my work to be part of a resistance movement. I also struggled with, if my work isn't in service of something greater, should I still be making work? And after We the Common was released, I fell into, I struggled a lot with feeling that I could claim artistry or myself as an artist when there were so many other things that I felt deserved my attention and my commitment. But I found that I couldn't, that there's a certain fidelity you have to have to your artistic center and life and direction, and to ignore it or to cast it aside was also was painful and also wasn't productive. So I basically had hemmed myself. I wasn't doing anything that I wanted. I wasn't a part of a movement or a cause in the way I felt like I could be. And then I also wasn't making the work that I wanted to make. So navigating that has been illuminating as well.
Yeah, it's really deep, the way that like the idea of what I should be doing, like kind of a shame-based orientation to our lives is the norm. And it's like, that's not any of our faults. We didn't invent that, but it really, it takes the enjoyment out of almost everything, like we live in a coercive society where from early childhood, you don't get a lot of chances to be like, what do I really want? Because that's not allowed. And so it's like, if I don't do what they want, I'm at risk, right? For punishment or rejection or worse. And so people I think like it's very hard for us to find authentic connection to desire, and to then authorize that it's okay to pursue it, to know when we want to say yes or no to each other or to ourselves. Like many people can't find time for their creative projects or their political projects because we are saying yes to things we don't actually want to do. Like they're just the depth of like the impact of a coercive, like of the coerciveness of racial capitalism on our lives, on every part of our lives. I mean, this book has things in it about sex, and I did a lot of reading about sexual consent and thinking about that in parts of my research. And just like we're not really good at figuring out consent about anything, because most of us don't actually think we can say no ever to like so much, or we are stuck on no in some relationships and then stuck on yes in others. Like I just feel like when I talk to artists or people making things, people trying to do things in groups, and then procrastination or flaking or ghosting, like these kind of patterns are they're like a dysfunction coming from a reasonable, appropriate response to a coercive system, where it's like, yeah, I want to like procrastinate my homework. I don't want to learn this bullshit U.S. history story that's not even true, or like, I want to like slack at my extractive job. You know, like those are appropriate responses, but a lifetime of that can create like an avoidance pattern internally, where I'm like, I kind of don't want to do anything, but I kind of can't say no to anything. You know, like that I think is not right now. We need a lot more aliveness to get like, we need to like be like, what do I really want to do? My life is probably going to be cut short by this ecological crisis. Who do I want to know? How do I want to be connected to my community? What did I come here to express? Like time's up. And even if for some reason some of us get to live a full life, that's still too short. You know, our lives are short, period. And yeah, this question of how to come into choice, I think is central to this book, and to like, I feel all of our paths, you know.
And did writing this book help you crystallize what it is you want to do and how it is you want to spend your time?
Just the light questions. Yeah, I think that what's really crystallizing that for me is actually my study of societal collapse. Like I think a lot of people are not with me. Sorry for everyone for whom this feels like a lot, but I think the level of denial about what's happening is pretty high. I think more people are feeling something with the Trump administration and the like terrifying speed of like so many forms of violence. But the ecological piece, there's like a lot of, it's very siloed politically, and there's a lot of denial and misinformation, including like false good news. Like this one thing happened, so maybe like the reality is like the systems are unraveling. Like the ways we've lived will not continue for almost everybody. That's why the billionaires are trying to go to space. They know, and they think that's okay. They're just going to extract right till the very last moment and hasten the deaths of most people on the planet. So for me, I'm like, wow, I think it's really likely my life is going to end early because of this. And I think that the conditions are going to be really intense the rest of the time I'm alive. And I really want to choose how I spend my time, and not just be doing stuff like because of either like some idea like, oh, I should try to like do better at my job or climb something, or, you know, like any of that nonsense. There's nothing left to climb. You know, there's no reason to try to hoard wealth or any of the things. That's never been my thing, but that's something a lot of people are told to want. But also like, just like appreciating being alive as much as possible, and doing every single thing I can to support care for all the people who are experiencing the worst harm now, and more of us are about to. So I think all the kind of mutual aid work we do is disaster prep, because it like gets us ready for like, then the next disaster comes in and we already know each other some, and we know how to share stuff, you know, or build skills, bring more people in, you know. So I feel like I spend a lot of my time just supporting people trying to build those kinds of groups, trying to problem solve in all those different kinds of mutual aid groups, you know, some of them doing work around prisons and policing, some of them around disaster prep or immigration issues or trans stuff or whatever. Just like, I'm just like, I want to not waste any time on anything that doesn't feel urgently connected to what I believe in, and to my experience of being alive, like by loving others, by being connected to nature, whatever that is, for me personally and experientially, like just being awake to what's really happening and not being lost in any fantasies about what life is supposed to be like or how things will work out, or we're like just in the unknown, which is the only place anybody ever is, but I'm aware of it this time. And yeah, I think that's what's on the surface for me. I'm curious. I mean, also you and I are both in a certain kind of, I think you might be younger than me, but we're in a certain kind of part of midlife, and whether you're having some of that kind of like reckoning or thoughts on that.
Absolutely. And I'll return to that. But I did want to ask you, what's your relationship to being in community with people who have maybe a healthier degree of denial than you do? As someone who studies societal collapse, do you have patience for it, or are you less patient?
I mean, I feel like none of us can really comprehend it. So I'm trying really hard to comprehend it with things I'm reading, and it's been really important to me to find some friends who wanted to talk about it, because a lot of people don't, which is understandable. But like, I feel like I need to digest this. It feels undeniable, and it's too painful to try to deny it. But most people I know don't want to talk about it, or want to talk about it a little bit lately, but didn't for a long time when I was hoping to. And I feel like I just feel so much compassion for that. When I read sci-fi books that are speculative and they show a future that is obviously completely impossible, like even if they show that things got hard, but that still there's like people are mostly living kind of the same, or there's a lot of technology and stuff, like I'm just like, I feel like that denialism is like bad. It's like bad propaganda for the current system. Or like when I read there's two books. I wrote a review of these two books. One is called The Deluge, which I think is worth reading. And the other one is called Ministry of the Future, which I think is a complete bullshit, but was like beloved by like Obama and stuff, which should tell you something. But those are two speculative fiction books about kind of the immediate future and climate change. And both of them in the end kind of have like things get fixed up to some degree, more so in Ministry and less so in The Deluge, by like state action. And I'm just like, so like, to me, that is like so harmful to further help people think that they should rely on states to solve this, when states caused this and will hasten it. That's the point of states, is to, extract and concentrate wealth. And so they're not going to like become sources of justice and resolution. They're going to like use like their response to climate change already is just like, let's further militarize the border to keep out the climate refugees. So I feel like, I do feel like frustration when I see what I feel is like propaganda for the denialism, or like talking points where people are celebrating like ridiculous non-solutions, like we'll just have more nuclear energy, or we'll grow meat in labs, or like we'll just use wind energy. Like the idea that we don't have to think about this and that it'll be solved through technology is just absurd. So those things make me upset. But in my actual connections with people in my life who aren't seeing it this way, I'm like, well, of course, like and it's no different than being in the prison abolition movement and being like, most people haven't gotten to think about this. The information that's out there is pretty bad. It's really great to have a chance to talk to each other about it. Like I have endless patience for us all to help each other grow our solidarities and, learn more about aspects of our lives that have been hidden from us. That feels just like part of all of our work,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Around being awake, I guess let's veer back to love and relationships and sex. And I really appreciate, you emphasize a great deal the importance of valuing friendships just as much as any sort of romantic relationship in a life. And we do share a lot of very dear friends. And I guess I wanted to hear you speak more about the importance of friendships in your own life, and sort of the assignment, not to be clinical about it, but assigning different friends different, not roles, but shared interests, like, who to go to for this particular thing, and this particular kind of support and this kind of comprehension.
Yeah, I love that question. Yeah, I mean, so much of this book is about I think of like friendship as like it's like a relationship where sometimes greater liberation is possible, like in your blood family or like your love relationships or at work. There's just like some really heavier scripts. And I kind of think our society is designed like the kind of patriarchal norm is like you're in your blood family and then you like get married and have a new blood family. And like this little period of like adolescence where you might have some friends. It's like right. And friendship is kind of like doesn't really matter that much. What really matters is landing that marriage, and what really matters is your blood family. And you're supposed to like ditch your friends for like anything, and people do. People ditch their friends for new love a lot and ditch their friends for family, and because it's this kind of like place that supposedly doesn't matter, we actually have more chances for consent there. Like I think more people have friendships where they give real feedback to one another. Like I remember like when I was in my early 20s and one of my friends told me like, oh, you always disappear when you have a new date. And like, that's the only person who would have told me that. And it was really helpful. It's like, oh my God, I do that. I didn't know it was having an impact on others, like friends who tell you, hey, I don't think that's working, or, you keep getting the same situation. Like, just like, and a lot of times people have a little more consent with their friends. Like, oh yeah, like I don't really want to eat that tonight. Whereas like with a date, you'd be like, oh, absolutely. Or, and then resent them later or something, like, I think it's just like a place, and it's, people can still treat their friends poorly and there can be abuse in friendships, but it's an interesting place. And a lot of times it's easier to like really want the best for your friends rather than want to control them. I think like I see that like people are really threatened by when their date changes their job or wants to have a new interest or move. But with their friends, they're like, oh, I'll miss you, but I want to see you thrive, like these sensations that it would be great for us to have more of. I mean, in the book, I say like it'd be great if we treated our lovers more like our friends in that sense. But I also think it'd be great if we treated our friends more like our lovers, like devotion, care, loyalty, like don't ditch your friends easily, stick with them. And, if we could just take the best qualities of these pieces and like, because the devaluing of friendship is really dangerous. And right now, I love what you're saying about like going to different friends for different things. Like for me, it's been vital. Yeah, this is a friend who also had a parent die when they were young. And so we can connect. Or this friend has a similar job to me and is a good person to talk to about those frustrations or get advice. Or this person really pushes my edge around this part of my politics and I want to be pushed there, like that kind of thing. And I think like, in the book, I talk about us all needing promiscuous support systems. And I think this is more so right now, like already, like even just since January, people are not doing well. Like a lot of people are telling me, oh, my friends are not calling me back, or like we got to assume that right now people are like a wreck, even if they don't say it. And so we all need to have like, I need to have a deep bench. I need to be like, I called Thao and didn't get a message back. I called Hope and didn't get a message back. I called Sophie. And then Beck called me back and was able to come with me to the hospital. Like,
right.
It might be that we all are caring for people in crisis. We're all experiencing the stressors. And so I think like one of the things I worry about the most is just how isolated most people are in our society. Like more than ever, people like get bad news by themselves on their phone, don't have a lot of people to turn to for support. More people live alone now than ever in history. Aren't just getting those kind of supports of like meals or groceries or shared cleaning or laundry. All that stuff's really hard. And childcare, and so I'm just wondering, how can everybody get more friends? And how can that include having friends who aren't like you, who you didn't know you'd be into. And for me, that like social movement work has been the place where I've made like lifelong friendships, often with people who I wouldn't have picked before. We're really different ages, or we don't have the same subcultures or signals, and then have like really showed up for me forever, and vice versa. And also not needing all your friendships to be the same. Like there could be a friendship where I'm giving a lot more support and other ones where I'm getting more support. Like just having it be like, just a really promiscuous, deep, like well populated scene, you know?
Oh yeah, it's got to be like house league basketball team where you didn't have to try out even, just everyone. Yeah, you got to roll that deep.
Yeah, I'm curious about your experiences of friendship, because I know that you are rumored to be a very excellent friend. I'm curious about what are your thoughts?
Is that what the people are saying?
There's been a few memes. Yeah,
that's way better than the other rumors I've heard circulating about me. I value friendship. I mean, and I think it comes, and I think we're similar in this way that, you know, the sort of the home environments you grew up in were not necessarily places where even maybe 50% of needs could be met. You know, friendship for me from probably middle school on, as a sort of as early as you can develop a deep friendship on your own, and you know, just develop trust and fortify a bond with someone. Yeah, my friends truly have been instrumental in keeping me alive, and I mean that in every sense. And you know, as you were saying, as we teeter along the lines of midlife or whatever this era is, you know, at a certain point, true, like friendships can fall away, and it takes great effort and a bucking of the system to recalibrate and say these people are just, or even more, or you know, it's not a competition. They're vital to me in my life, and I'll say, you know, the past couple of years, I was married and then not, and so to have the opportunity to circle back to my friends when I needed them in every way, as in like I needed a place to live. You know, when you upend your life, you need everything, and it was such a gift. I mean, it was an incredibly hard time, but it was such a gift to be able to revisit and reunite with my friends who I've had forever. But when everyone has their own lives and partnerships and whatever and work, you don't necessarily ever get the opportunity to need and be needed in that same way that we did when we were young. And I'm so grateful to them for absorbing me in my time of need in that way. And I look back on that period as just this beautiful renewal, and you know, it was just this beautiful opportunity, and it changed the way we are with each other now, you know. And I joke that now I've like a weird amount of friends, like, because I had to live with them, I know like where they keep their Tupperware. You know how each household they do their Tupperware differently, but I know that about them, you know. Yeah, and it's, why would you, you know?
Yeah, I love that though. We should all have sleepovers with our friends, you know. Also, just want to say, like, I've been doing these live book events, and at every event, people have come who are like, I'm in the middle of an agonizing breakup. And I just want to, like, what you just said about how it was so hard. Like, it's so hard and can feel unsurvivable, and also like you can survive it, and also usually there's like deep learning. Like, it is hard that a lot of the most beautiful learning in our lives comes through pain and transformation. So, if anyone's listening who's going through a terrible breakup, I think we're going to see more breakups and more big changes in people's personal lives because of how stressed out we all are about what's going on. So I just really appreciate, I just want to like lift up what you named about that you did to come through the breakup, and it strengthened your whole network and intimacy with all your friends. It's like so beautiful.
It was, and when I was reading, there's a passage in your book when you're talking about how isolation actually is dangerous, and the more conventional ideas of partnership, and yeah, it's so easy to become isolated, where you might, in a way, as you have to reemerge, or whatever, if you leave your life, whatever circumstances arise, and you might face a moment where you do have to re-meet your friends again, because what I encourage people to not have to do that, and just sort of maintain their friendships steadily. Yes. But the beauty of true friendship is that they are, they will receive you however you are and however long it's been.
Mm-hmm. And practicing before we're in crisis. Like, I know that I had this learning over time about how I was afraid I would get really embarrassed about having any friends over if my house was dirty. Like, that's just like my own baggage from whatever. And just the process of deciding to be like, I am going to actually trust that these people who I do all these other things with are not judging me if there's some dishes out, or, somebody in my household's painting project is on the table. Like, just, how can we practice before we're in crisis?
Mm-hmm.
Building trust with our friends. How can we be like, I'm going to say the thing that I've wanted to say but haven't said. Oh, like, sometimes it hurts my feelings when you do this, or I really love this, or do you mind cuddling? I really need physical touch right now. Like, can we ask for a little more help? Can we acknowledge the friendships more? Like, how can we strengthen the channels and help people feel the connection and the belonging?
Right.
While in crisis, but also before, since crisis is coming for all of us all the time. Like, there will be a breakup or a loss or a move, or an illness, and so just like, what would we want to have in place for our next crisis? Or like, oh wow, I don't have friends I can count on for this or that. How would I go meet them? I think a lot of people are asking themselves that question.
Right.
Where do I meet my people? And my the movement and creative activities, and like, we have to go to where groups are. It's not easy. People are pretty antisocial these days, and that again is our society. It's not us. But
Right.
that part about isolation being dangerous, I think I learned that from Tourmaline. Just like this idea, like, if something bad happens to me and I'm isolated, it's so much more dangerous. If I'm in a relationship that becomes violent, it's so much more dangerous if I'm isolated. If I get sick and can't care for myself in the home, so much more dangerous if I'm isolated. Like, anything bad, if I go through a depression or a severe anxiety, or the loss of a loved one, like, everything is more dangerous if I'm isolated. So therefore, isolation is the danger. Like, that and isolation is something we can try to work on with ourselves if we're noticing it. And like you're saying too, what you're saying makes me think about, there's a life cycle where people go into partnerships, and sometimes it relates to having kids or caring for an elder,
Right.
and then becoming more isolated. And so how do we support people with kids and who are caring for elders? How do we like make community projects that are kid friendly, or that help people with elders, or that help elders? How do we like see this as a collective dilemma? And then also, how do we avoid the kind of romance myth stuff that's like, I fell in love, I'm going to Love Island, I'm ditching all my projects and friends, I'm only about this person, or I only hang out with my friends with this person now, and don't tell anyone what's really happening in the relationship. These are very common patterns for people, queer or straight, that like we just don't talk about enough, that lead to so much distress.
Another thing I really appreciated was all of the sort of guideposts and avenues for different kinds of healthy communication that you provided in your book. To be sort of emotionally promiscuous, as you say, that requires, like, to have healthy relationship, it requires really healthy communication. I am coming to this late in my life. I would say only probably in the past 8 months I've learned how to talk about myself. But it's so difficult, as you say in your book, in romantic relationship, in that kind of vulnerability where you're triggered to hell in so many different ways, to maintain and stay grounded and to communicate. And I guess, can you talk about how much practice you've had and how have you studied?
Yeah. I mean, I think like for me, communication blocks are often about like protecting, like I'm afraid of what someone else will think of something that's happening for me, something I need or prefer or want, or I'm ashamed of something, like a reaction I'm having, oh, Thao, I'm feeling X because you forgot my birthday, or because you're becoming closer with our other friend, and I'm afraid of being left out. And how can I learn how to talk about my feelings in a way that acknowledge them as mine and is not like you're doing something wrong to me? That's what a lot of us do when we finally express our feelings. It's externalizing it onto the other person, and blaming them for our feelings. So how can I instead be like, I'm having a feeling and I'm looking for emotional support on it, which is also like, then also if I'm on the other side, how can I not be defensive? Like, well, I forgot your birthday, but I mean, there's a lot going on, or what, whatever. I did all these other things for you, or, like whatever. We all just, we're very defensive. And because we live in a society that's not supporting us learning how to give and receive feedback. We're all afraid of being thrown away because we live in a society that literally throws people away, So how do we like have simultaneously like the emotional awareness to be able to communicate what's happening, and the level of like, there's a feeling here. It doesn't mean I'm bad or you're bad. And if I think I want support on it, can I express it in a way that includes a request for support, rather than having kind of like we joked about this when we talked on the phone earlier, I throw my screaming baby at you,
Right.
That I learned from our mutual friend, Colby.
Who's the paragon of humanity, who's like, who's how, that's how
an actual saint.
Yeah, actual, literal.
So that like, how do we be more honest, but also like that kind of like, your feelings aren't my fault. So even if you're really activated and you're like, Dean, this and this and this, can I be like, wow, my loved one is in distress, or the person in my activist group or whatever is in distress. They've got a screaming baby on board. I can care for them without like taking it on. Like, I don't have to be like, either everything Tao's saying about me is right and I'm bad, nor everything Tao's saying is a lie. Like, I don't have to join the dance. I mean, like, you're in distress. Like, what's the right next move for someone in distress who's seeing the world through a probably real narrow focus, with one strong feeling or narrative that, we're hoping to get back to a broader perspective eventually, but that's not what's happening right now. And if I'm the one in distress and I'm having that narrow focus, I might not know it. So can my friends help me be like, yeah, Dean, that's true, but Tao is also someone who shares your values. And I know it's been hard right now and you all are disagreeing, or whatever, how can people help me ground in reality and not let me do too much damage, like destroy our group, or, go slash your tires or whatever I've got in mind, you know what I mean? And so that we can like get through the fact that we will bring up strong feelings in each other. So for me, it's like, it's communication, but it's really the underlying, like, I can't communicate what I don't know, you know what I mean? Or what I can't actually feel. Right. So I can like have like good formal communication skills. I'll be using them to say like horrible, mean things, or to try to manipulate you or control you or shame myself. It's like the underlying thing is, can I be aware of feelings and not be like, those feelings are just the whole truth, but instead, wow, that's a real feeling. I really care about that. I might need to give it some space or support it, but I also still want to try to act on my values. Mm-hmm. That's the move. That's like the hard move that I think most of us don't have a lot of skills in yet.
Right. I really appreciated what you said around active and true listening, and why some people might get defensive. The idea around just because I am here listening to you and your grievance, it doesn't mean that I agree with the issue that you take. It's like that I care that you've been impacted.
Yeah, like, can I say, I mean, I talk about this in the book some, but it's helped me so much when I've been in conflict with somebody to be able to repeat back to them what I heard or hear them repeat back. It doesn't mean like if I'm like, Thao, you didn't do dishes 6 times and you think it was 4. We don't need to go back and forth about 6 or 4. Like you could just like, Dean, I hear you saying that it's been hard for you, that I've not done the dishes as much as you liked.
Right.
I'm really listening to you.
Yeah.
You know, I can tell that you want us to have a good housemate relationship and that we both really love living here. And so let's work on it together. Like, just can I come toward instead of just immediately pushing you away, even if some of the stuff you're saying isn't totally accurate or like wasn't said in the nicest way. Like, it's great if we can learn to give each other feedback in really caring ways. And sometimes people are pissed and we want to still hear them, you know? And this is especially true when we're in groups with lots of people with different communication styles.
Right. Yeah. And sort of, and the undercurrent and the priority being always to maintain connection.
Yeah.
And not to be right. Even when you eventually, like, let's say I was right and you did only do the dishes 4 times or whatever. Like, it's, in the end, how expensive was that conflict? Right.
Right. Yeah, exactly. When we're done having this conflict, where do we want to be? We want to be more connected, more aware of ourselves, feel more safety and belonging in the relationship, which could include that we've added a new boundary. It could mean I realize that it'll work better if we only hang out once a week instead of twice, or whatever. It doesn't have to mean we only are moving in one direction towards closer, but whatever it is, I want to feel more like safe and emotionally aware, and like I can be more of my real self. You know, and ideally I also want to feel like more aware of how we are connected, if we have shared values, or sometimes a conflict ends in clarifying that you don't, and that's also useful, unless it's just a big story I'm telling you about you and it's not true. Right, because I'm actually just feeling hurt, and so now I'm like, Thao has bad values. That's, a lot of us use our politics to we wrap up an emotional experience in a political framework to justify our reaction. That's really common in our movements. And usually there's some truth to what's happening politically, but there's also an emotional piece that we're ignoring. And the story we tell ourselves is just like, well, Tao's messed up because blah, 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 And so that doesn't help us, like and if I have more emotional awareness, then I can be like, I both disagree with the proposal that Thao brought to the group, and I'm actually having a stronger reaction because I felt left out when the other people went for drinks and I didn't go. Like, instead of just being like, this proposal is horrible, I need to tear it to shreds, when really I'm reacting to the social thing,
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. This is only a little tangential. I really appreciated, you had a sidebar in your book around not being a fan of the term nonviolent communication. Or the label nonviolent. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So for people who don't know, the concept of nonviolent communication, it's like a method that you can buy workbooks about. You can go to therapists who specialize in it. You can take courses on it, and it's a great method. It's like this thing where, like, if I want to like share feedback with a friend or lover or whoever, I share what I observed and what I felt about it. So, like, I observed that you didn't contact me on my birthday and I felt sad. Instead of going to the person and making a generalization about them, Thao, you're a bad friend. Thao, you're selfish, whatever. That's telling someone what they're like, as opposed to, this is what I observed and how I felt. So it's more true. And it's also it's usually less like extreme and big. It's a little more humble and people can work with it more. And so it also includes, like, ideally getting someone's consent to have the conversation. Like, can we talk about this? I want to share some feedback. So that's nice, because what if it's better after a nap, or I haven't taken my meds today, or whatever. And then also there's a chance to say, like, if the other person wants to share back, you can be like, not now, let's do it in another session. So you don't go straight into defensiveness. There's some more elements to it, but that's the basics. And I think it's a pretty good formula. So I included it in the book. And I hate the term because there's this whole broader framework in, like, our, like, sort of liberal culture of, like, pacifism and nonviolence that says that we should only engage in resistance that's not very disruptive and doesn't like damage any property or hurt anyone. While meanwhile, the systems that are killing all of us are allowed to use all the violence in the world. And it's this kind of liberal framework that's very heavily relied on in the US. It misunderstands and uses inaccurate histories of the civil rights movement and anti-colonial resistance in India and many other movements to kind of tell this story that good resistance movements don't like pick up arms, don't smash ATMs, don't knock over trash cans, don't wear masks, whatever. And it's used, one of the things that happens because this ideology is so common is that people in our movements actually throw each other under the bus. They're like, those people are bad because they actually like damaged the pipeline to try to stop it, or they threw a Molotov cocktail at the construction site or whatever. Maybe Sophie or Hope, you would put in the chat the link to that 5 questions for cultivating solidarity document that we made that's kind of about these things. Might be helpful to people. But yeah, so the term nonviolence is so kind of tainted for me because of this political misuse of it. And one other book maybe that you could put in the chat as well that I think is really useful on this if people are curious is called How Nonviolence Protects the State by Peter Gelderloos. And that book is free in the Anarchist Library online. And yeah, I think it's just like a very juicy topic right now, because right now is a time when we need to do a lot more law breaking and rule breaking to help each other survive, right? Like people need to, figure out how to get abortion drugs to people and trans medicine and help people hide from ICE and the police and like a lot of other stuff. And so we need to boldly support everybody who's taking risky, illegal action for liberation and survival. So these narratives about pacifism and nonviolence are problematic. And I don't think that that's what the nonviolent communication framing means to invoke, but I had to write about that in the book because I disagree with that thing so much, and I wouldn't want people to confuse that as an endorsement of nonviolence politically.
Right. Thank you for that. I really appreciate you.
Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Are we close? Do we begin to do the little Q&A section? I think that they're ready. Sophie says they are ready to give us sessions. Can you see the private chat to grab them and read them, Thao?
Yes, I can. Okay, first step. When you're locked in a survival mindset, and it's also rational to be, how do you make time to focus on the things that make life actually worth living?
Such a beautiful question. When I hear this question, I hear survival mindset for me might mean I'm really stressed out and protected because of like the onslaught of bad things that are happening, like living with dangerous people or working a really stressful or scary job, or having more to do than you can possibly do, or experiencing harassment somewhere regularly. So many things. I think that's what I think when I think of, in case that's helpful, what this is bringing up for me. And I think it's like how to find any room in that and how to not try to be like, I'm going to be 100% different, but instead just like, what's a 2%? Is there any time or place in my day where I feel any of that relax? Or do I have an idea about a small way I could carve out, like is there a part of my commute when listening to a certain song or finding a moment of silence or touching a plant would change things? Is there anyone in my world who, when I talk to them, I can drop into any safety? Or maybe I could if they would hold me, or if we did it in a darker room, or whatever, we all like figuring out our own nervous system reactions. Is there something? Because I think it's true that when we're in a state of panic, which, as this question asker is saying, can be really reasonable in the current conditions, it's pretty hard to like be creative or learn or like figure out what to do that might bring ease. We can get stuck in that kind of survival panic. And some of us are stuck in it even when the conditions aren't happening anymore. Like a lot of this book is about like when really hard stuff happened to us early in life, and then we're still reacting like that's what's happening now. And we're reacting to other people like they're bringing the same kind of threat that maybe happened earlier in life, or like that we're just as vulnerable as we were as kids, which maybe we aren't, right? So how to get current, is another way to say, how do I come up to like, is there any options available that I'm not seeing, or any space available that I could access in my own psyche, or like using things in the world or supports? I think, all of this, I think, is harder to do alone than with others. Like having someone to talk to. Some people use therapists, some people friends or spiritual leaders. Like just, it's really hard to get out of stuck mindsets alone, especially when the conditions are still pouring in. I'm curious if you have thoughts on this, Thao.
I would contribute that meditation practice has been truly helpful for me to understand what it is that I need in seeking solace or comfort or just a little bit of reprieve. If you're seeking but you don't even know what you're looking for, so like the first step for me is to assess what it is that I think would calm my nervous system, and to be really deeply invested in breathing and true, as they say, mindful breathing, but actually relaxing into and releasing yourself to the idea that the only thing that has to happen is your next inhalation and then the next exhalation. And once you can, once your nervous system can settle down, you can make clear decisions around what you need. And I've often fallen prey to deciding that I needed something, like acting just to act, to do something, instead of assessing what it is that needed to be done. So then I've just created another issue for myself.
Yeah,
so sitting still is great.
Yeah, the part too, I think that for me, silent meditation, like at least I know what's happening. So I could be running around doing my day and my mind is doing all these stories and all these reactions. And even if I sit for 10 minutes and don't do anything else besides notice my breath, and then notice my mind go away, and then notice my breath, and then notice my mind go away, at least even just having seen what the scene is internally is a little bit of clarification. And even if I can't change it at all, sometimes I can't change that state, but I actually think something really wild happens when you bring awareness to the state versus when you're just like acting out of that state with no awareness. For me, that inevitably shifts something. And the more I do it over my lifetime, the more I'm quicker to know, oh, you're in a strong state. Oh, it usually has these kinds of thoughts. That state often brings these kinds of thoughts. They might not be true.
Right.
Like that's the real move, would be able to be like, oh, the thought, they're probably still going to come, but oh, it's that again, that old thing. Okay.
Right. Yeah. And then you just ride that wave. Or ride the snake, as my friend's husband likes to say. He says that about caffeine. Like he loves to drink coffee and then ride the snake. I don't take that, absorb that how you will. Next question. What strategies for emotional regulation that are decolonial and anti-oppressive do you recommend? As the police state increases, how do we evolve from the therapist industrial complex?
Yeah. One of the things I see inside this question is like how our methods of healing in the society are like completely tied up in the methods of oppression, right? Like psychiatry and the wellness industry, and it's all, a lot of it's just like the same origins of white supremacy and capitalism. It's inaccessible. It's got weird ideas about gender and poverty and everything. So radical movements have always had healing methodologies that were part of their radicalism, right? Like, Black Power liberation activists in the 60s got really into acupuncture, and feminists did consciousness raising groups, and people today are doing climate grief groups, and there are radical lineages in all the healing realms, right, where people are taking the wisdoms and trying to either kind of brush off the really yucky colonial capitalist stuff that's been added, or reinvent them through in a way that makes them more aligned with like current values. So finding that, and for me, that includes finding things that are free and accessible to a lot of people. Like, and part of why I write this book, I'm like, I hope people will find it free online, and will also screenshot a chart and then talk about it in their group or with their friend, and not have to read the whole book and not have to buy it. And Hope and I are making a podcast related to the book, again, to try to make something else free that more people can just use. We can create groups of study in our own communities. I do think it's also useful to have confidential spaces to talk about strong feelings and experiences. And so doing that with paid therapists or with friends where we agree to confidentiality, creating our own support groups around specific experiences and dynamics. Feminists have always done that. Anti-racists have always done that. I also really have relied on 12-step programs, which are wildly imperfect. Like, some people are forced to go to them by courts. There's coercive dynamics, but they're also like the largest anarchist organization in the world. Like, there's no bosses, there's no leaders, people aren't getting paid. Every group gets to come up with its own norms and try to follow its guidance. And there's kind of a vibe of like, if you didn't like what people said, just move along because they're not your boss. Those are good skill sets for us to all have, to be able to go into a group space, see if there's anything good there for us, and not get too attached if there was things we didn't like. Like, if we could all go to all group spaces and take what you like and leave the rest, instead of having to burn it down if it's imperfect, which of course all of it is. So I think, just figuring out how we can get whatever we can get out of what's here now, and how we can make the support groups and spaces we wish existed. And there's a lot more, there's a lot more people writing about healing and liberation from radical lineages and circulating that stuff. And there's lots of cool workshops people are putting on. So I feel like it's just we are kind of making it all the time together. And a lot of it is how can we make it so that a lot of people can go and not have it be behind a paywall.
And I'd also add, more somatic approaches, just releasing trauma from the body, or releasing trapped stress and tension. And okay, next step. Any advice for building support networks and romantic connections in a rural environment? The apps are shit. Also, struggling with balancing my mutual aid causes with building social connections.
Yeah, one thing I will just say that I think more of us should be doing generally, that I've also heard is really useful for a lot of people in rural communities, a lot of my friends in rural communities, is doing disaster prep work with people. Disaster prep work is really important because all the disasters are coming, but finding ways to meet people along the lines of a shared need, like having a go bag party, or everyone getting together and talking about how we store water or how we turn off our utilities or whatever, starting with something that's kind of low barrier, where we don't have to have the same politics, and then seeing who shows up and whether we can influence each other and start conversations that connect us to more things we care about. I think the best way to find dates and friends is by doing stuff that we believe in, and those people are there. That's ideal, right? And that can be hard for so many reasons. But I think, the apps can be worse and can feel like a weird, terrible shopping trip or something, where the humans are like commodities. I mean, use them if they're working well for you. but if they're not working well for lots of reasons, for lots of people, they don't. Yeah, I think that just like figuring out how to get more people together, how to meet more people is a lot of it. And then also how to meet people in a way where we could talk about something we cared about. And I think, mutual aid work, ideally, our mutual aid groups should try to always be bringing in more people, because one of the main ways they die is that some people found them and then they don't ever have more people come in, and then they get tired or they get sick or they have a kid or whatever. And then the group gets smaller and smaller and it gets more and more stressful. People burn out. So how to create any mutual aid group that you're in, unless it's doing very illegal clandestine work, in which case you might not want it to be quite as big an open door, but most of them aren't. And how to make the ones where you can be places that really recruit and welcome new people and help them understand the decision making and take on meaningful roles and become co-stewards, so that I think, all my social connections come from my movement work, honestly. Just a few
Dean,
from now.
I love this. Can you make maybe not your first podcast episode, but one of the first mutual aid mixer recommendations? And then can your podcast be a matchmaking site?
Oh my God, I would love that. I don't know how to build that, but I love that idea. I'm ready to try.
Okay.
I would love to be a matchmaker. That's so fun. But don't blame me for what happens, because, a lot of bad things happen in our relationships.
That's right. You're not responsible for what people bring in from their childhoods and then they are re-triggered, and that's not on you.
If you think they're really hot, it's probably because you're about to really blow it up.
That's right. Yeah, that's a great point. Things can be too hot where the reason you're in it is you just want to watch it crash and burn. You want to feel
or could we be so skillful that we could hold all that heat and
all that's a great reactions. Point. Our mutual beloved Colby is the one that helped me understand that a relationship could be both hot and safe, and I didn't know that was possible. And then I saw Colby, I remember very vividly a couple years ago, and then it sort of I understood, and it's such a gift when that is possible, and it can happen, and it does happen. Okay. In relation to disability justice, how can we build community in a disabled way? Online connection is more accessible for me, but I believe that digital technology should and will collapse soon.
Yeah, thank you for bringing this up. I think also this kind of question is coming up in every event that I do, so I can tell that it's a really important one. It's on a lot of people's minds. I think it's often coming up at the live events because I'm having the events be masked and have various COVID safety concerns, and people are so unused to masked events right now. It's so sad. Almost nothing is masked, which means that things are really exclusive of a lot of people. And people have a lot of questions, how do we create spaces that can be more accessible to more people? How do we have boundaries about access needs and actually change our movement so that they become how do we influence each other to become more concerned about disability justice? And what do we do if we're in communities where people aren't? I think too, the person is saying, online connection can have a lot of benefits for a lot of people, for rural people, for people who can't leave the house easily, for people who are immune compromised. And we all do need, I think, a good number of in-person connections, because because if you get too sick to be able to get out of bed, we might need help, because there's just a lot of depth of crisis that we need to prepare for that includes in-person relationships. And I think more people have less in-person relationships right now. And online relationships are really replacing in-person relationships for some people. And so the real question for me there is, yes, how do we all kind of do that creative thinking? How could I put myself out there and go to things and whatever, but also how do we all become more disability justice oriented so that we go towards people with disabilities, people who can't leave the house right now, people who need us to take certain measures to visit them. I think there's a way in which people with disabilities and people who are sick are just left behind, really intensely. And so It's not really the problem of those facing that to solve it. It's the problem of everybody to like really refigure how we do friendship, how we deal with like hierarchies of desirability in our culture that can leave people behind. That can also relate with like sex and romance. How we think about our organizing, and we think, okay, we're having this go bag party. Some people on our block probably can't come to it. Can we, if we're putting a flyer on everyone's door, can we also leave a way to like leave a note back on your same door that says like, I won't be able to come, but I'd love you guys to bring me a go bag, or I'd love to somebody to come over here masked and talk to me about a go bag, or, you know, like just like, how do we find out who on our block or in our community wants to connect and needs more support to make it happen. I think that's just like something we can all build in.
Right. That's beautiful. We have one more question, which is for Lovers and Fighters was such a huge mind shift for me. Where were you when you wrote that? And to what extent did that essay inform this book?
This is a question I've never been asked. It's so fun. That is an essay. You can find that essay on my website. Maybe Sophie will put it in the chat. It's an essay I wrote in my 20s, and it was originally a letter I was writing to a lover who I was introducing to the idea of non-monogamy. Like this person, you know, we were very young. This person, I was basically like trying to convince this person this was going to work out. But then I ended up making it into an essay. I think maybe because I was like just like invited to write an essay for something, or I don't know. And yeah, I was really young, and I mostly didn't write anything else like that, like stuff about relationships in that way. But that essay was so popular for years. Like people translated it into all these languages and would send it to me. And it actually was one of the inspirations for writing this book. I was like, people want more stuff like this. People want to talk about this area of life in a politicized, radical way. And that was actually when we were talking at the beginning of the session about how I would be like having all this doubt and shame. Is it okay to write this book? And then I remember people like this stuff. People want this. There are people who want this. So that essay was a help to me. Like people's responses to that was a help to me in deciding to move forward to write this. Should we do our poem? Is it time?
I think it's poem time, Dean.
Okay. So I've been ending a lot of these events with sharing this poem by Diane de Prima. This poem, I think, is from 1973. And I really love it. And I've found that people at these events are, you know, we're all just really struggling. And this poem seems like kind of ritualistic way to honor that we were together and trying to work out these hard things. And yeah, so Thao and I are going to read it. We're going to go back and forth a little bit. And if we were all in the same room, I would ask everybody to say the refrain, which is "May it continue," together every time, you know? So I'm just going to read. And if you want to, from home, wherever you are, join and say "May it continue" whenever I say it or whenever Thao says it. Okay, so I'll start us out. Cacophony of small birds at dawn. May it continue. Sticky monkey flowers on bare brown hills. May it continue. Bitter taste of early miner's lettuce. May it continue. Music on city streets in the summer nights. May it continue. Kids laughing on roofs, on stoops, on the beach, in the snow. May it continue. Triumphal shout of the newborn. May it continue. Deep silence of great rainforests. May it continue. Rolling fuck of great whales in turquoise ocean. May it continue. Clumsy splash of pelican in smooth bays. May it continue.
Clean snow on the mountain. May it continue. Rite of birth and naming. May it continue. Rite of instruction. May it continue. Rite of passage. May it continue. Love in the morning. Love in the noon sun. Love in the evening among crickets. May it continue. Long tales by fire, by window, in fog, in dusk on the mesa. May it continue. The night music, may it continue. Grunt of mating hippo, giraffe, foreplay for snow leopard, screeching of cats on the backyard fence.
May it continue. Without police, may it continue. Without prisons, may it continue. Without madhouses, marriage, high schools that are prisons, may it continue. Without empire, may it continue. In sisterhood, may it continue. Through the wars to come, may it continue. In brotherhood, may it continue. Though the earth seem lost, may it continue. Through exile and silence, may it continue. With cunning and love, may it continue. As woman continues, may it continue. As breath continues, may it continue. As stars continue, may it continue.
May the wind deal kindly with us. May the fire remember our names. May springs flow, rain fall again. May the land grow green. May it swallow our mistakes. We begin the work. May it continue. The great transmutation. May it continue. A new heaven and a new earth. May it continue. May it continue.
Thank you, Thao.
Thank you, Dean.
Thank you so much, Dean and Thao and Shonda and Val. This was really beautiful. And thank you to all of our audience members who were so active and participatory in the chat. Really grateful for everyone who made this happen. Beck, if you have any closing words, but I think we can say
I think we can just say thank you all so much. I'm really moved and holding it. I appreciate it.
Yeah. May it continue.
May it continue. Good night.
Thank you. Good night, y'all.